Hey scholars, welcome to our last section of Chapter 10, Chapter 10-5, which says, what is the ecosystem approach to sustaining biodiversity? So that's kind of what we were looking at the beginning, but what is the overall gist of all this and kind of summarizing what we can do as human beings to help that ecosystem approach. So we can use a 4-point strategy. There's 4 points to maintaining and protecting ecosystems. The first one is to map the global ecosystem, identify species within those ecosystems. The second bullet is to locate and protect most of those endangered species that we find in those ecosystems. The third bullet is to restore the degraded ecosystem that we've already kind of tampered with and messed with and degraded. And the last one is development. If we develop anything further as far as buildings, human industry, everything else, it must be biodiversity friendly. And those are our 4 major points as far as strategies to maintaining and protecting ecosystems. One person that we really want to highlight here is Norman Myers. In 1988, he identified biodiversity hotspots which were rich in plant species. And he sought after to remove any human activity from those areas. Well, there wasn't a whole lot of public support or funding for his idea. And the drawbacks to his approach, obviously it would have been a good idea for plant species because plants do provide us many resources like medicines and all sorts of stuff. But there wasn't a whole lot of support and funding. There were some drawbacks because even though those areas were rich with plants, doesn't necessarily mean they were rich with animals as well. And people were also going to be displaced or literally moved from those regions. They would lose access to those resources. And so people were jumping on the bandwagon for Norman Myers. But that's a good idea. They really talked about and started thinking about hotspots. And there are 34 different biodiversity hotspots throughout the globe today. A lot of them, positioned around the equator, but still almost in every country, which is kind of cool. There even are some, there's about 6 of them in the U.S., and we'll highlight some of them. Obviously, Hawaii is a big one. Very rare bird species found in Hawaii. The San Francisco Bay Area, which is number 2, very big, a very, very unique area with a sea otter and sea lions and all sorts of things. Number 3 is the Southern Appalachians, which has, if you didn't know this, that area right there, and even in North Carolina, that point actually is the highest biodiversity of any salamander species in the, I think even on the globe. So very, very unique area. They call that the salamander capital of the world up in Tennessee right there. Death Valley is number 4, some very unique creatures in the desert there. On the leeward side of the mountain, there you go, Chastity. Number 5 is Southern California, the tip of Southern California, and the last one is the Florida Panhandle, and we don't forget about the Everglades is an area of high diversity as well. So those are our major hotspots within the U.S., and we're trying to do our best to protect those. The case study is on Tanzania, Africa. It's in Eastern Africa. It is one of the highest concentrations of endangered species in the world today. It says that they include 96 species of vertebrate, 10 mammals, 19 birds, 29 reptiles, and 38 amphibians, 43 species of butterfly, and at least 800 endemic species of plants, including most species of African violets. So this area of the Eastern Mountains is the highest biodiversity and endemic species known to man in the U.S. And right now it's being threatened because there's killing forests, because farmers or loggers are coming in, there's hunting and poaching and fires and everything else. And it says in 2007 this group actually worked in this area and surveyed the area, and it said that farmers and loggers have cleared 70% of the ancient forests. This loss of habitat, along with hunting, has killed many of the species, including elephants and buffalo, and now 71 of the 96 endemics are threatened, and 8 of them are critically close to biological extinction. So we really need to focus on these hotspots and maintain them so we can cut this stuff out and really try to maintain those areas, or we're going to lose a lot of species that might be valuable, having some intrinsic value here in the future. All right, one thing we're going to look at is the UN Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. And basically, the United Nations came together in 2000 and went ahead and tried to identify all the ecosystem services, even where are we degrading those services, and also identifying areas of high kind of threat. And they did this, and they found that they identified key ecosystem services. They identified that 62% of human activities are degrading or overusing the Earth's natural services that are provided for us by the Earth. And they also identified highly stressed areas, or what they call life raft ecosystems, where basically humans, because they live in such poverty, are literally using that ecosystem or that rare biodiversity hotspot ecosystem as a life raft, is just to keep them afloat. They're killing, we talked about this with bushmeat. They're going in there, they're killing anything they can in order to sell it at markets so they can at least keep their families alive. And so that is what we call a life raft ecosystem, where literally the ecosystem has become kind of the flotation to keep those people in impoverished areas afloat as far as their wallets are concerned. So we can rehabilitate and restore ecosystems that we've damaged. One way is to restore, or restoration, and that's literally where we're returning a particular degraded habitat or ecosystem into the condition as similar as possible that it used to be. Rehabilitation is another one that's basically turning a degraded ecosystem into a functional or a useful ecosystem without trying to make it or restore it exactly how it was. We're trying to do as much as we can to get it to rehabilitate and kind of take off on its own and restore itself. Replacement is a little bit different. That's literally replacing a degraded area, possibly with another type of ecosystem, and then creating an artificial ecosystem is like we talked about with sinking ships and things like creating reefs that would maybe recreate an ecosystem if we have to do it artificially with maybe man-made products. So how to carry out most forms of ecological restoration? We got to first identify what is causing the problem, stop that, reintroduce species if possible, and then make sure that those things that we did before don't happen again, and protect them from further degradation. Another science focus area is the tropical dry forest in Costa Rica. And I can't even say this, the Guanacaste National Forest or National Park Restoration Project. And basically what happened was a lot of that forest was burned, degraded, and fragmented into large-scale conversion to cattle ranches and farms. And now it's being restored and relinked to national forests that are adjacent to those mountain slopes. Their goal was to eliminate damaging non-native grasses and reestablish a tropical dry forest ecosystem over the next 100 to 300 years. So at least they have a little bit of a goal in mind, maybe a little bit longer goal in mind. What they did is they actually, there was animals that were used, they literally brought in cattle and horses to bring in and aid in seed dispersal of native plants. And they didn't have that. There used to be organisms there that did this. The Johnson realized that the original forests had been maintained partially by large native animals that ate fruit, but those animals were long gone and were not around anymore. So they actually brought in cattle horses to do the aid and seed dispersal, so that way those trees and those vegetation can be replenished. And actually he got local residents involved in this as well. They got local residents, and they knew that if they got local residents involved, they would be the ones that really took ownership over and helped maintain this habitat and saw this project through. And that's exactly what happened. Another case study or a little picture in your book is the Curtis Prairie in Madison, Wisconsin. It says, Curtis Prairie in Madison was restored from abandoned farm fields. It serves as a highly instructive example of a successful prairie restoration and is studied by restoration ecology students from around the world, especially University of Wisconsin. The photos here that you see, the insert photo taken in 1934, this one right here, shows part of the process of restoration. A controlled burn to prepare the land for establishment of prairie plants. These researchers have just burned a part of it. You can see where it's all burnt up in the middle there. And they are actually, if you can see them holding those sacks, which are literally seeds to native vegetation. The second person from the left, this guy, is actually Aldo Leopold, which we talked about before. And, almost 100 years ago, not almost 100 years ago, but pretty close, now it looks like this. It's a well-maintained prairie in Madison, Wisconsin. So will restoration encourage further destruction? Preventing ecosystem damage, remember that precautionary principle is way easier than trying to restore it. It's way cheaper as well. We know only about 5% of the Earth's land is preserved from the effects of human activities. So the more we encourage, restoration is just going to destroy it even further. We hope not. We hope we can open eyes of people to see the value in biodiversity, especially the ecosystem approach. One way, this is this one person's theory. This is Michael Rosenweg in 2003. He wrote this book, Win-Win Ecology: How Earth Species Can Survive Even in the Midst of the Human Enterprise. He said that the more time that we focus on trying to restore habitats and things like that, the more people are going to degrade it. So what he says, we're not going to stop growing as far as population. So we need to start changing the mindset and do some reconciliation or applied ecology. Literally get communities involved and educate them and have community-based conservations where those people are in charge of that section, and educating them will be the biggest impact. So like in Belize and the black howler monkeys, educating people there to really protect the habitat as well as for and be aware of those howler monkeys, protecting vital insect pollinators, bluebird protection with special housing buckets that people are creating and putting out in their backyard. In Berlin, Germany, rooftop gardens. If they're going to build and construct things, at least replenish it by putting it on the tops of buildings or finding areas to replenish those areas of natural wildlife. And then San Francisco, the Golden Gate Park. Even in New York City, the park there in there. That's another way of just trying to not only keep humans in growth and the growth of enterprise, but also try to get the environment kind of a share, kind of like just let's share the earth overall is what his idea was. All right, so what can you do? Last bit of today is adopt a forest, plant a tree, take care of them, recycle paper, buy recycled paper products, buy sustainably produced wood and wood products, choose wood substitutes like bamboo furniture, plastic itself, help restore a nearby degraded forest and grasslands, and maybe even landscape your own yard with plants that are native to your area. That is the end of chapter 10. We'll see you guys next week.